Dan Mandis here, and Stephen Bucci. It's been a minute. Stephen, always great to have you on Nashville's Morning News, of course, with the Heritage Foundation, foreign policy and legal analyst, among many other things. When to talk about what is going on with Iran, as of course everyone now knows, their president killed in a helicopter crash. I want to talk about, number one, a lot of people are asking me, so I'm going to ask you, talk about sort of like the political hierarchy in Iran. It's the supreme leader who is at number one. The president is like number two, right?
That's correct. The president is more of an implementer than a decision maker. And the president normally focuses on domestic control and financial issues, not on the international relations things and military stuff. He does have power over the military domestically, but the stuff that goes on overseas, the operations of the IRGC Quds Force commandos that are out there around the world, they come directly under the supreme leader and then through the generals in the Quds Force itself. So he's an important guy. Raisi was a bad person. He's known as the butcher of Tehran. He was known even when he was the kind of attorney general of the country. Executions went way up. So he's an honest to goodness bad person. That the world is probably a better place for his absence. But the people that follow him are not suddenly going to turn Iran around, or even, a 90-degree turn in any direction.
Yeah, among those lines, from what I understand, President Raisi was being groomed to take over for the current supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He's 85 years old. So does this leave a line of succession crisis in Iran? And how do you see that whole thing playing out?
It doesn't appear that there's a crisis. Obviously, he was the front runner, and now he's gone. But they have already, rumors are already starting that the new front runner is actually Khamenei's son, who is also one of the cleric leaders. So it looks like it'll turn into a familial turnover when the supreme leader passes away. So it doesn't look like there's going to be a big shakeup. It's, again, not any sort of anticipated change of direction. Any of the people who say, well, if we're nice to them, they'll be more moderate, like people in the Biden administration, that is just ludicrously silly. That is not going to happen. The only way this regime is going to change is if the people of Iran rise up to a degree and throw them out.
Well, they did have a bit of an uprising years ago, but Raisi was one of the ones who stamped that out, right?
That's exactly right. He crushed it. The most recent uprising was over the young woman who took off her headscarf and paraded around the town in defiance of the religious police that are there, and that caused, sparked uprisings in a bunch of cities across Iran, mostly led by young women who were treated brutally. There were many killed, many, many more tortured and imprisoned, and it finally, sort of stamped it down low enough so it's at a simmer. The only possible, if you want to call it positive, if you're in the middle of it, it's probably not that positive, but thing that could happen from this is there are people who are celebrating in Iran over Raisi's death because of his brutal policies in the past. And if the regime decides to go heavy-handed in dealing with those outbreaks, it could provoke more. And maybe this will lead to something where the people throw off this oppressive regime and finally get some freedom inside the country of Iran. Sadly, the particular administration we have is unlikely to be supportive in any way of that sort of movement because they've got people embedded in the Biden administration who still think that the Iranians are going to be a useful partner in peace across the Middle East when they have shown zero inclination to do so, or anything akin to being open to that sort of policy. So wrong person in the White House at this time if that kind of internal dissent breaks out. So I'm guessing it's unlikely to cause any big change.
Stephen, let me ask you, sticking with Iran for a second. So they're out there trying to blame American sanctions for that helicopter crash, saying that their aviation was impacted by the sanctions from the West. This is a Bell helicopter, I guess, that was really old, number one. And number two, from what I understand, they don't always do safety checks with their helicopters and airplanes, I guess. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin earlier this morning said America was not involved in this crash in any way, shape, or form. Will Iran, regardless of anything we say, still blame America for the death of President Raisi?
Well, I think that while it may not be a public position for them, from the whatever their, press secretary podium is, but there will be that underlying trend. I mean, this helicopter was given to or sold to Iran during the Shah period. So it's a old helicopter. And even under the best of conditions, we probably wouldn't be flying that helicopter anymore. But because they couldn't get others, they kept using it. Their standards of maintenance and safety are not what you would find in a country like ours or even in any of our Western allies. And the fact that they were flying in what would be clearly soup so thick that there's no way you should have taken a helicopter up in it for any reason. But I'm guessing the president said he didn't want to ride down the mountain in a car.
Yeah.
He was up on a mountain visiting an installation. So they got to blame somebody because it's not acceptable to blame themselves for making stupid decisions. So, yeah, they may point their finger at us. It's like, okay, then maybe you should have stopped trying to kill our people and support the proxies around the Middle East that are causing war and terrorism. And then maybe we could take the sanctions off. But that's not going to happen. What's really bothersome is, could somebody in the Biden administration, say, well, they're right. If we had given them parts, they probably would have been safe. Hopefully nobody will do anything silly like that. But the Iranians will point and say, if you had let us buy that, this wouldn't have happened. Fine. Well, we don't care.
Well,
That's their problem.
Never underestimate the silliness of the Biden administration. One last question here. The International Criminal Court seeking arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, everybody knows what's going on with Hamas, human shields. They're rooted underground. They have a lot of their weapons and their people and perhaps hostages under hospitals and schools. Talk about this whole want, I guess, of the ICC to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu.
It's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. It makes the International Criminal Court look silly. They have just handed Hamas a victory in that they have now, in a court of law, declared complete moral equivalency between the Hamas terrorists who did the massacre on October 7th and the nation of Israel taking action to protect its people after that brutal attack. That it's crazy. I would ask you to remember this same court swore out warrants against George W. Bush and my old boss Donald Rumsfeld during the Bush administration for our actions in Iraq and Afghanistan. And a day after it happened, Secretary Rumsfeld did a press conference and said, well, if that's what they want to do, I guess we'll have to move the NATO headquarters to another country. And 2 days later, they decided to withdraw the indictments. Unfortunately, Israel can't do that for them. But it's this is just virtue signaling, and carries absolutely no weight or no authority against a head of state that is simply protecting his country. It's ridiculous.
Real quick, I've got like 90 seconds left. Israel, Rafah, you got about 4 battalions of Hamas holed up in Rafah. Israel is, I guess, waiting to go in. What's the latest on that? And do you think that Israel will be able to take out Hamas wholly, or is there always going to be some remnants left?
I think there probably will always be some remnants left, but I think Israel will go in and will eliminate those 4 battalions and basically make Hamas a non-player. The problem now comes up, which is the dispute internally in Israel, is what the heck are they going to do with Gaza when they get done? Israel has asked, a coalition of Arab countries to come in and administer Gaza because they don't want to run it. They're not trying to retake Gaza from the Palestinians, but not one Arab country or Muslim country of any sort has volunteered to help and take over the administration of Gaza. So this is on the Muslim world as much as anybody else. That is the one thing that's going to slow Israel down, is them trying to figure out what the heck they're going to do once they destroy Hamas.
Well, and the worry is that it's going to continue to house Hamas, who, after this whole thing ends, if it ever does end, that all of the military action between Hamas and Israel will do nothing but embolden hatred for Israel and the West. And so from the embers, a new generation of Hamas fighters may ultimately be cultivated. Is that a worry?
That is a worry. This is the old thing. You can't kill your way out of this kind of conflict. Well, but you can make the other side ineffective in their ability to fight you, at least for an extended time period. So that is a problem. If you don't get every person that's involved in Hamas, it could reinstate itself and begin to grow again. But it's not like you have a choice. You can't just ignore them when they've already said, we're proud of what happened on October 7th, and we're going to do it again and again and again until Israel is eradicated. When you're talking to people like that, it's kind of hard to be reasonable.
Last question, Stephen Bucci. Any word on whether or not Biden is actually going to bring in refugees from Gaza?
After that one announcement was made, there was such a hue and cry.
Yeah.
The Biden administration went completely silent on it. I think they realized that is a massively dumb idea and one that has horrific national security implications for America domestically. I'm hoping they've thrown that in the trash can where it belongs, but we'll wait and see.
All right.
They do have some odd ideas.
All right, Stephen Bucci, always great to have you on Super Talk 99.7 and Nashville's Morning News. We'll have you on again real soon.